All right, so here's the TT01. Um, I'll talk a little more about what's in it. So for racing, I guess track performance. I guess important is to get a good body. So here I'm using the Extreme Twister, mounted eight around 8 mm forward, so that there will be more steering. The TT01 I feel is by nature understeer. And so now I have a good balance. So it's more steering. Then I keep the rear wing relatively big because my setup is a short wheelbase. So I need to keep the rear from spinning out. So it's a balance of more steering, more rear grip, and short wheelbase. All right. If you notice, the body, even though it's lightweight, is very solid. The sides are solid. Go It's because I added foam weather strip. So it's dense foam, not heavy. It's very lightweight. So it takes up the gap here between the body and the chassis. So that's one good thing about the TT01. It's that it's a tub chassis. It's easy to create a flat under tray for aerodynamics. So it just goes here and then it feeds to a small diffuser. If you take a look. So I sealed everything using a Teflon masking tape. It's very smooth. Yeah. Air just flows well underneath the car. So that's one of the things I've done to improve the TT01. So let me go through it. So the body, then of course very important is you have the correct tires. And then third is the TT01 is relatively heavy. Maybe around 100 grams heavier than the graphite belt cars. That's why I needed to use a lightweight shorty battery. And to keep the weight balance, I put in the speed control on this side as well. And also by freeing up the space here, it allows me to mount everything low on the chassis for low CG. So the only, in terms of, so now the weight is around 1,350 grams. So it's very competitive weight. Anyway, I'm using a 5.5 turn motor. I have more than enough power. More than enough. This is a relatively cheap Hobby Wing 120 BL. Um, so I just, even though it's 5.5, you can detune the power. So I just use zero timing, and then over here, you can set the punch to be mild, so that the power is not so aggressive. Here, I use a 6122 pinion. So that's an FDR of 7.2. It's just stock. Now, with I found that the part where the pin and the spur is, that sometimes gets mangled, even though there's a plastic circular plastic to keep the pin inside, because the spur moves forward a little bit, moves backwards and forwards. There's a play, and to take away that play, I put in 0.9 mm shim between the spur and the rear bearing here, and that prevents the movement of the spur and keeps the plastic holding the pin tight. It doesn't loosen and then strips the spur. Uh, yeah, so basically that's it. Important now is the diffs. The diffs is the stock diffs. So the front, I put chewing gum. You can use Tamiya putty, thick oil, or high friction grease, anti-wear grease. I've done all of that, but the best so far is just plain old chewing gum. You just take it from the packet, dry, put it in, and put enough, and then you have it's almost like a spool. No need to overpack it, because if you overpack it, the excess will find a way out of the diff. Just enough. Rear is still the open diff, but I smear 1,000, no, 1 million silicone oil on the gears so that it has a diff action as well. And then on to the springs and shocks. I use the cheap Tamiya CVA plastic shocks. Springs, I leave it to you. Find the right balance for your track and your preference. But it's important that when it rolls, there's a good balance and it creates a good rotation. No understeer, no oversteer. I put, I think, 3 O-rings to limit the droop. The droop is the up travel. So my up travel is just a little up travel front. Also a little up travel rear. Similar to what I have in my more expensive racing cars. I copied the droop settings to the TT01. Here I think it's just 2 O-rings. Here it's 3 O-rings. Ride height is 6 mm and around 5.5 mm. Camber is probably around 1 degree because I use the non-adjustable fixed upper camber links. I don't need the adjustable. I don't need to. It goes fast enough. That's it. Ideally, try to get you in the ballpark. The front should be around 75% of the rear in terms of stiffness of the springs. Shock oil, I just maintain or whatever I have. It's around 400 CST, the typical shock oil settings for racing cars. So that's, I think, what helps keep this relatively not so movie. It's the O-rings inside the shock. So it really limits the up travel. There's still suspension movement. See? Suspension must work to absorb the bumps. Yep. And when you corner, it has to have that nice balance front and rear. Yeah. I still keep the stock dog bones. I haven't upgraded the drive shafts. I do have a metal aluminum drive shaft, but the stock plastic works fine. Even the plastic steering works fine. I just wanted to upgrade to bling bling red. That's the only reason why it's red aluminum. And I think that's it. That's the yeah. So also I removed all the slop. So if you notice, no slops here, no slop on the suspension. This one has a little slop already. This one has quite a little bit of slop. Same with this one. The way I remove the slop is the bearing itself. I glue to the hubs and knuckles. And then when I insert the the shaft, I also glue that. So it's all glued, super glued to each other. But however, as you keep running bumpy tracks, even the glue breaks away, and now I have some slop again. I also try to remove the slop here with some super glue on the ball and Teflon tape on the suspension arm here. But important is when you remove the slop, don't make sure there's no binding. Better to have slop than it binds and there's friction in the suspension. The more friction you have in the suspension going up, the movement, the less traction you will have. So you need to have a smooth suspension movement for maximum grip of the tires. And at the same time, not to have so much slop. The car is like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't like the slop. I use the optional 2-degree rear toe-in hubs from Tamiya. And yeah, that's it. Ball bearings, typical whatever ball bearing. Make sure it's pretty good quality ball bearings. Some ball bearings I've seen that are cheap are just too sloppy as well. They cause lots of movement. Electronics is just the Sanwa MT4. It's a either I have the original Sanwa receiver or I use a DAS microclone receiver. I use an R12 Power HD R12 servo, which is cheap as well. And yeah, so if uh, basically what helps is when I've been running the automatics, the X-ray, the high-end touring cars, I kind of get an understanding of what impacts performance. You know, the droop, the hardness of the suspension, the chassis flex, and yeah, the diffs, like a spool and the 5K diff, and all these things I translated back to the stock TT01. In terms of the flex, fortunately, the TT01 has a good flex feel. When I do this, it's similar to my high-end touring cars. So I'm lucky in that aspect. The tub chassis has a good flex out of the box. No need to mess with it. It's it just works. The It gives good turning capability. It's a short wheelbase. Uh, Unlike some of the like graphite cars, no matter how much I try to tune it, the flex, everything, it still is not perfect. This one is pretty good out of the box. Good design, or lucky. It's very nice. Uh, what else can I say? So that's it. I hope this is enough. If you still have questions, just leave it in the comments. But for those who have been asking, for me to talk more about the drivetrain and everything, yeah, so the shims here. Um, Otherwise, it's a TT01. It's very well designed. I like the symmetry, front, rear arms. The distance of the shocks is the same front and rear, so it's easy to get the spring rate of the front and compare it to the rear. So if you use a blue spring, Tamiya blue, you use a Tamiya yellow. I think that's a good balance. And then you just go harder, softer, depending on your track, depending on how your car behaves, how heavy or light your car is. But that's an easy way to set it. Um, of course, I use the gold traction compound, the one I develop and sell. It helps a lot. All right, so by design, this is narrower. The width is narrower, so it's very good for low to medium grip trucks and small trucks. It's kind of an advantage actually. It it helps you flow through the corner with less resistance, less tire scrub. It helps generate more traction, more reactiveness into the car. Only when it's super high grip will this have a big problem of traction rolling or very becoming too twitchy, and then the high end will probably be faster than a TT1. But if your scenario is a local club where the track is not it's medium grip or even low grip, this has a good advantage in terms of its inherent design. And I think a long time ago when this was designed, the tracks then were low grip parking lots. So yeah, that's why it's designed the way it is. It's kind of narrow, kind of short. The advanced touring cars now, like the X4 and whatever, they have a long wheelbase, like 260 and I think they're now wider, up to the maximum to give stability because the power of the motors are very strong now. The grip is very high. Whether you run in carpet or the big races, the grip is very high. Speed is very high. You need lots of stability. But for club racing, small tracks, low grip tracks, I think this is the way to go, or it's competitive. Yeah. And actually, this car is the same car my daughter raced to win her first Philippine champion as a junior in the junior class. Tamiya Cup junior champion in the Philippines 2010, I believe. And then she went to Singapore, almost TQ'd with this car, and had a chance to win, but eventually dropped down to third place, but still good. So she was third on the podium. She won a kit. It was her first international race. She was around 10 years old, the only I think female in that event. And it's actually this is the same car. So it's this car's around 10 years, 12 years old already, but it's still alive. Still the same dog bones. Still knows it hasn't worn out. These are very thick dog bones. The same gears. The diff is very tough. Same. I haven't replaced the gear diffs. I haven't replaced the chassis. It's the same upper deck. It's all the same, even the shocks. It's a 12-year-old TT01. And I do believe it can beat a lot of the modern cars, depending on the track grip scenario. It's not about being a faster driver. It's about me, the TT1 being a pretty well designed car. And if you do just some of the things I've done, it might help make it perform better for you as well. The diffs are very critical. The tightness. Put a chewing gum here. It makes a big difference. Keep the weight low. So I see some with big wires all over the place. That creates a high CG, affects your performance. The shock with the limited movement helps in creating a more reactive and stable car. All these things. All right. So hope these things. Oh yeah. If you notice here, this screw here always backs out on me. So I drilled it through. So I use a long screw all the way and then a lock nut here to make sure these shock towers do not come loose. In my experience, they do come loose, especially on bumpy tracks. Yeah, so that's it, in depth. So, and now next, what am I enjoying? So I'm enjoying this. This is already done. So this one is my next toy. It's a very old associated RC12 scale pan car. And I like the simplicity. In the 80s, this is what, Tamiya or the other did, because we had little power. So efficiency is the name of the game. Lightweight and efficient drivetrain. So if you notice, straight axle. So this one is a silver can, just a basic stock motor. I use a drone battery so that I can put the electronics here, battery here, and keep using the T-plate. It's still the old T-plate setup. It's not a link. And it's pretty good fun. It's faster than most of the four-wheel drives in one of the tracks I've been playing this on. Faster than most. It was fast. Of course, harder to drive. It's rear-wheel drive. But if you can get the correct setup, it becomes easier. So I'll have my daughter practice on this to help improve her driving skills. It's a good driver training car, and it's cheap. There's nothing to maintain. This is it. You just keep changing the tires. Nothing to maintain. No gear diffs, no drive shafts to rebuild. There's only one shock absorber. uh, it's so simple to play this car. It's so efficient. The battery, even though it's only 2000 milliamps, will last 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So lots of playing time. The tires do not wear out too fast. It's only 650 grams with the body. So it's very fast. If your track has good grip, It's so fun to drive this. Even though it's rear-wheel drive, it can go as out accelerate four-wheel drives with the enough traction because it's lightweight. So in the next videos, I'll show this how it runs, even the F1. So I've been buying old stock of F103 parts, F104. I'm excited to run F1 again. I like the direct drives and rear wheel drive. That's my forte. That's where I do well in terms of competition. I'm very competitive when it's that kind of category. All right, so I hope all this helps. Question, leave it in the comments. I'll try to answer it there if I miss something out. All right, cheers.